You're getting ready for an important presentation at work, standing in front of the mirror, and there's this voice in your head giving commentary. You look tired. Everyone's going to notice. You're going to mess this up like you always do. Why did they even ask you to do this? You're not qualified. Someone else could do this better. You're going to embarrass yourself. And by the time you walk into that meeting room, you're already defeated. Not by anything that actually happened, but by the voice in your own head that's been tearing you down for the past hour. I know that voice. I've lived with it my entire life. That constant internal narrator that seems to have an opinion about everything I do, and most of those opinions are negative. It's like having a cruel roommate living in your brain who never sleeps and never shuts up. For the longest time, I thought this was normal. I thought everyone had this harshly critical voice constantly pointing out their flaws and predicting their failures. I thought it was just part of being self-aware or realistic or keeping yourself in check. I didn't realize that the voice in my head was actively sabotaging me. That it was creating anxiety and depression and holding me back from opportunities. That it was, quite literally, my own worst enemy. Let me tell you about a specific moment when I realized how destructive my inner voice had become. I was at a friend's birthday party, and I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. But the second I walked in, the voice started. You're overdressed. Everyone's looking at you. You look ridiculous. You shouldn't have come. Nobody really wants you here. You're going to say something stupid and everyone will see what a fraud you are. And I believed it. I spent the entire party in this anxious fog, barely talking to anyone, convinced everyone was judging me. I left early, feeling awful, telling myself the party sucked and I was right to be anxious. But here's what actually happened, which I only found out later. Multiple people had tried to engage me in conversation, and I'd given one-word answers and avoided eye contact. My friend was hurt that I'd left early without saying goodbye. People thought I was standoffish or didn't want to be there. Not because of anything real about me, but because my inner voice had convinced me everyone hated me, and I'd acted accordingly, which then made people actually pull away. My inner voice had literally created the rejection it predicted. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's when I started to understand. This voice wasn't protecting me or helping me or being realistic. It was actively destroying my life. So let's talk about the inner voice. That constant stream of thoughts and commentary running through your mind. Because we all have one. The question isn't whether you have an inner voice. The question is, what is that voice saying to you? And whose side is it on? For some people, their inner voice is supportive. It's like having a good coach in your head. When things go wrong, it says, that's okay, you'll figure it out. When they face challenges, it says, you can do this. When they make mistakes, it says, everyone makes mistakes. What can you learn from this? That inner voice is on their team. But for a lot of people, and I was definitely one of them, the inner voice is vicious. It's critical, harsh, unforgiving. It catastrophizes everything. It assumes the worst about you and about how other people see you. It points out every flaw, every mistake, every way you fall short. And it never, ever shuts up. Where does this come from? For most of us, our inner voice is shaped by the voices we heard growing up. Critical parents, harsh teachers, bullies at school, whatever. We internalize those external voices and they become our inner voice. We start doing to ourselves what was done to us. My dad was incredibly critical. Nothing was ever good enough. An A- was, why wasn't it an A+? A successful project was, okay, but you could have done better. Any mistake was proof I was lazy or careless or not trying hard enough. And I learned to see myself through his eyes, to judge myself by his impossible standards. Even years after I left home, even after our relationship improved, his voice was still in my head. I'd become my own harshest critic, carrying on the criticism he'd started. And I thought this was normal. I thought this was just how you stay motivated and keep yourself from getting lazy or complacent. But here's what I didn't understand. Harsh criticism doesn't actually motivate most people. It paralyzes them. It creates anxiety and shame and fear of failure. And when you're operating from that place, you play it safe. You avoid risks. You don't try new things because what if you fail and prove the voice right? Think about it this way. If you had a coach or a boss or a friend who talked to you the way your inner voice talks to you, would you keep them around? Would you think they were helping you be your best self? Or would you recognize they were toxic and damaging and run the other way? I had this realization when I started paying attention to what my inner voice actually said. I pretended I was talking to a friend and said out loud the things I said to myself. You're so stupid. You always mess everything up. You're embarrassing. Nobody likes you. You're worthless. And I was horrified. I would never say those things to anyone I cared about. I would never be that cruel. But I said them to myself all day, every day, and thought it was fine. And here's the really insidious part. Your inner voice feels like truth. Because it's in your own head, in your own voice, you assume it must be accurate. You don't question it the way you'd question someone else's opinion. You just accept it as fact. But your inner voice isn't fact. It's just thoughts. Often anxious, distorted, fear-based thoughts. And those thoughts create feelings, which create behaviors, which create results that seem to confirm the original thought. It's a vicious cycle. Let me give you an example. Your inner voice says, I'm terrible at public speaking. This thought creates anxiety when you have to give a presentation. The anxiety makes you stumble over your words and lose your train of thought. You give a mediocre presentation. Your inner voice says, see. I told you you're terrible at public speaking. And the cycle continues. But what if the original thought wasn't true? What if you're actually not terrible at public speaking, you just have an inner voice that tells you are, which creates anxiety that interferes with your performance? The voice isn't describing reality. It's creating it. I started noticing this pattern everywhere in my life. My inner voice would make a prediction. This date is going to be awkward. They're not going to like you. And then I'd be so anxious on the date, so in my head, that I couldn't be present or authentic, and yeah, it would be awkward. But not because I was inherently awkward or unlikable. Because my inner voice had psyched me out. Or my inner voice would interpret someone's behavior. They didn't text back right away. They must be mad at you. You probably said something wrong. And I'd spiral into anxiety, replay every conversation, convince myself I'd messed up. And when the person did text back with a completely normal, friendly message, my inner voice would move on to the next thing to worry about without acknowledging it had been completely wrong. So when does your inner voice actually help versus hurt you? I think there are a few key differences. A helpful inner voice is honest but kind. It acknowledges challenges and mistakes without being cruel about them. It sounds like, that didn't go as well as you hoped. What can you learn from it? Not, you're such an idiot. You always screw everything up. A helpful inner voice is encouraging. It reminds you of your strengths and past successes when you're struggling. It says, this is hard, but you've done hard things before. Not, you can't do this. You might as well give up. A helpful inner voice is realistic. It assesses situations accurately without catastrophizing or assuming the worst. It says, that presentation had some rough spots, but overall it went okay. Not, that was a complete disaster. Everyone thought you were terrible. A helpful inner voice is compassionate. It treats you the way you'd treat a good friend who was struggling. It offers support and understanding, not harsh judgment. A harmful inner voice, on the other hand, is cruel. It calls you names, uses absolutes like always and never, predicts catastrophe, assumes everyone is judging you, focuses exclusively on negatives while dismissing positives. And here's the thing. A harmful inner voice often disguises itself as helpful. It'll say, "I'm just being realistic," when it's actually being pessimistic. It'll say, "I'm keeping you humble," when it's actually tearing down your confidence. It'll say, "I'm protecting you from disappointment," when it's actually preventing you from trying. I used to think my harsh inner voice was what kept me achieving, what kept me from becoming lazy or arrogant. But when I really examined it, I realized the opposite was true. My harsh inner voice made me afraid to try things. It made me play small. It kept me from opportunities because I was too convinced I'd fail. The irony is, when I finally started working on developing a kinder inner voice, I actually started achieving more. Because I wasn't paralyzed by fear of failure. I could take risks, try new things, learn from mistakes without shame spiraling. Kindness didn't make me lazy. It made me brave. So how do you change your inner voice if it's been cruel your whole life? It's not easy. It's not a switch you flip. It's a practice, a gradual rewiring of thought patterns that have been with you for years, maybe decades. First, you have to start noticing it. Most of us are so used to our inner voice that we don't even register it consciously. It's just background noise. So you have to start paying attention. What does your inner voice say when you make a mistake? When you look in the mirror? When you're facing a challenge? When you're with other people? I started keeping a journal of my most common negative thoughts. And when I saw them written down, I was shocked by how harsh and irrational they were. Nobody likes you. Really? Nobody. Not one single person. You always mess everything up. Always. Every single thing. These thoughts seemed true in my head, but on paper, they were obviously exaggerated and false. Then you have to start questioning the voice. Instead of automatically believing it, treat it like any other opinion. Ask yourself, is this actually true? What's the evidence for and against this thought? Would I say this to someone I love? Is this helpful? When my inner voice says, "You're going to fail," I've learned to ask, do I actually know that? Or is that just fear talking? Usually, it's fear. Usually, I don't actually have evidence that I'll fail. The voice is just catastrophizing. And then you have to actively practice talking to yourself differently. This feels weird at first. It feels fake. But you have to do it anyway. When you make a mistake, instead of, "You're so stupid," try, "That didn't work out," but everyone makes mistakes. When you're facing something scary, instead of, "You're going to embarrass yourself," try, "This is challenging, but you're capable." I'm not talking about toxic positivity or lying to yourself. I'm talking about basic kindness and realism. Treating yourself the way you'd treat a friend. One exercise that really helped me was imagining my inner voice as an actual person. What would they look like? How would they act? And honestly, when I imagined mine, it looked like a mean, bitter person who enjoyed making me feel bad. And I thought, would I take advice from this person? Would I trust their judgment? Would I let them be in my life? Hell no. So why was I letting them live in my head? Then I started imagining what I wanted my inner voice to be like. What would a truly supportive inner voice sound like? And I started practicing being that voice for myself. It felt absurd at first. Telling myself, "You've got this," or "You're doing your best and that's enough," felt like lying. But I kept doing it. And gradually, it started to feel less fake. It started to sink in. Another thing that helped was noticing how my inner voice affected my behavior. I started tracking it. When I had a harsh internal dialogue, how did I act? Usually anxious, withdrawn, defensive. When I managed to have a kinder internal dialogue, how did I act? More confident, more open, more willing to take risks. And I started seeing the connection. My inner voice wasn't just making me feel bad. It was actively limiting my life. Every time I listened to the cruel voice and let it stop me from doing something, I was making it stronger. I was proving it right. So I started doing the opposite. When my inner voice said, "Don't apply for that job, you're not qualified," I applied anyway. When it said, "Don't talk to that person, they won't want to talk to you," I talked to them anyway. I started treating the cruel voice like a liar trying to hold me back, not a truth teller trying to protect me. And you know what? Most of the time, the cruel voice was wrong. I got jobs I thought I wasn't qualified for. People wanted to talk to me. Things I was convinced would be disasters turned out fine or even good. And every time the voice was wrong, it lost a little bit of power. I also had to learn to distinguish between my inner voice and intuition. Because sometimes you do have a genuine gut feeling that something's off or wrong. And that's different from the anxious catastrophizing of a cruel inner voice. Intuition is usually calm and certain. It says, something about this situation doesn't feel right, without a lot of drama or emotion. It's information. The cruel inner voice is dramatic and emotional. It says, "Oh my God, everything is terrible, you're going to fail, everyone hates you," with a lot of anxiety and panic attached. That's not intuition. That's fear. Learning to tell the difference took time. But as I got better at it, I started trusting myself more. I could listen to genuine warning signs without being paralyzed by anxious thoughts. I also want to talk about how your inner voice affects your relationships. Because it doesn't just hurt you. It affects how you interact with everyone around you. When your inner voice is constantly telling you nobody likes you, you act defensive and withdrawn. When it's telling you you're not good enough, you people please and don't set boundaries. When it's telling you everyone's judging you, you judge them back or avoid them entirely. I damaged so many relationships because of my harsh inner voice. I'd assume people didn't want me around, so I'd pull away, and they'd feel rejected and pull away too. I'd hear criticism in neutral comments because my inner voice was already criticizing me. I'd sabotage good things because I was convinced I didn't deserve them and it would end badly anyway. And changing my inner voice changed my relationships dramatically. When I stopped assuming everyone was judging me, I could actually connect with people. When I stopped being so harsh with myself, I was less harsh with others. When I stopped catastrophizing, I could address conflicts directly instead of spiraling. One of the most powerful moments in my therapy was when my therapist asked me to speak to myself the way I speak to my best friend. We role-played it. She gave me scenarios, and I responded the way I'd respond to a friend. I messed up at work today. And I said to myself what I'd say to them: everyone makes mistakes. It's not the end of the world. What can you do to fix it or learn from it? And she said, "Do you notice how different that is from how you actually talk to yourself?" And I did. I was so much kinder, so much more reasonable, so much more supportive with others than I ever was with myself. And she said, "You deserve that same kindness. Why wouldn't you deserve it?" And I didn't have a good answer. I just never thought I deserved it. I'd internalized the message that being harsh with myself was necessary, that self-compassion was self-indulgence. But it's not. Self-compassion is how you build resilience and confidence and the ability to actually grow and improve. Here's something else I learned. Your inner voice can change depending on your physical and mental state. When I'm tired, hungry, stressed, or anxious, my inner voice gets meaner. The same situations that I can handle calmly when I'm well-rested become catastrophes when I'm depleted. So part of managing your inner voice is managing your basic well-being. Getting enough sleep. Eating regularly. Moving your body. Managing stress. These aren't luxuries. They're essential for maintaining a healthier inner voice. I also noticed my inner voice got worse when I was isolated. When I spent too much time alone with my thoughts, the negative voice would spiral. But when I talked to friends, when I got outside my own head, the voice quieted down. Connection and perspective were antidotes to the harsh inner critic. And therapy helped immensely. Having someone outside my own head reflect back what I was saying, point out the cognitive distortions, challenge the harsh narratives, that was crucial. Because when you're stuck in your own head, it's hard to see how distorted your thinking has become. You need external perspective. Now, years into this work, my inner voice is dramatically different. It's not perfect. I still have days where the old harsh voice comes back, especially when I'm stressed or scared. But it's not the default anymore. The default is now a kinder, more realistic, more supportive voice. And my life is better in every measurable way. I'm less anxious. I'm more confident. I try more things. I have better relationships. I'm more resilient when things go wrong. I'm happier. All because I changed the conversation I'm having with myself all day, every day. So I want you to think about your inner voice. Really think about it. What does it say to you? Is it on your team? Is it helping you become who you want to be? Or is it tearing you down, holding you back, creating problems that don't need to exist? Because here's the truth. You're going to spend your entire life with yourself. That voice in your head is your most constant companion. It'll be there in every situation, every challenge, every moment. Shouldn't it be someone you can trust? Someone who's on your side. Someone who builds you up instead of tearing you down. You deserve a kind inner voice. You deserve to talk to yourself with compassion and support. You deserve an internal environment that helps you thrive, not one that makes you struggle. And you can change it. It takes work. It takes awareness and practice and patience with yourself. But you can absolutely change the voice in your head from enemy to ally. Start today. Start right now. Notice what your inner voice is saying. Question whether it's true and helpful. Practice responding to yourself with kindness. Your inner voice has enormous power over your life. Make sure it's using that power to help you, not hurt you. You're worth that effort. I promise you are.